Hello, hello, hello. What up, fam? Let's go. My name is Thor, and welcome to Milestones Middle School Digital Shorts. Over the last couple of weeks, we have been doing this series called It's Personal. And you know what? What is personal to me, and I think we can all agree, is that superhero movies are pretty big nowadays. Between Marvel and DC, we have enough movies, video games, and spin-off shows to keep us entertained for a very, very, very long time. My favorite movie? Well, you guys can take a guess. My favorite movie is Thor Ragnarok. This was the third movie in the Thor series. And when that movie was first released, we got to see the depths of Thor's backstory. Watching it in theaters, by the end of it, it felt like the whole audience was on the edge of their seats, cheering on Thor as his powers were awakened. Now, before I saw this movie, I didn't have much of an expectation. The first two movies that Thor was released, nothing spectacular. It felt like we were always wanting a bit more from them. That's why it's so great that the whole movie dug so much deeper into Thor's character. I think that's because the writers knew that in order for us to understand who Thor is, we have to understand his backstory in a deeper way. And did you know that the same thing is true for us? Just think about this. How many people in our schools, in our neighborhoods, on our teams, or even those watching now, do we assume we actually know? We might feel confident that we know the stories of some people just because we know some things about them, like their name or what they're good at or what they're into. When it comes to clothes, music, or friends, we think we know the full picture of who a person is because of what we can see. For example, the way they act, or the way they live, or who their friends are, and more. That tells us all we need to know, right? Not exactly. See, we can know a lot about a person, but not really know them. Just like in Thor, there's a really good chance there is more to the stories of the people around us than we can see or know. Now, I think you probably know what I mean because you have a backstory. You know that in your life, there's more to the story, and you want the people around you to recognize that too. Maybe you got angry at a sibling and yelled at him this week. Maybe you found yourself thinking, she'd understand if she knew about the friend drama that I'm going through right now. Or maybe you turned an assignment in late and thought, my teacher would be more understanding if she only knew the power got shut off in my house this week. Maybe you stopped texting a friend back and thought, they have no idea how depressed I am. If they did, they'd know why I'm not responding right now. You see what I mean here? That stuff going on that you wish other people would consider, that's your backstory. It's what you're dealing with. It's where you're coming from right now. And if you're like me, you wish people would try to understand just a little bit more of it from time to time. But I think the question for all of us is this. Do we give this same kind of grace and consideration to other people? I know I don't. The reality is we rarely consider the backstories of other people. We don't often stop to consider where they're coming from. And because of that, we don't ever really personally know them. So, how do you and I begin to see the backstory? How do we make an effort to understand where people are coming from? How do we make it personal? Thankfully, Jesus gives us a great example to follow. Over the past couple of weeks, we've been looking at a cool story from Jesus' life. A couple of thousands of years ago, he was traveling in ancient Israel and came across the town that was well known to a bad guy. I know we talked about superheroes a lot, but this guy was more of a supervillain in his community. His name was Zacchaeus, and Zacchaeus was a tax collector, which basically meant he cheated his neighbors out of money just so that he could keep his wealth and his status. Even though his reputation was rough, when Zacchaeus heard that Jesus was in town, Zacchaeus went out and made an effort to see him. He wanted to catch a glimpse of Jesus so much that he climbed up a tree just to see if he could spot him in the crowd of people. And what was even crazier about this is that out of the entire crowd of people that were surrounding him, Jesus noticed Zacchaeus up in that tree. And not only that, Jesus walked right over, called Zacchaeus by name, and told him to get out of the tree. Why? Well, for a reason no one expected: to hang out. Yes, that's right. Jesus wanted to hang out with the supervillain in that community. He wanted to hang out with Zacchaeus, to spend time with him, to get to know him. And not just anywhere. Jesus wanted to go to Zacchaeus' house, in a place where we can see here in the scripture. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to Zacchaeus, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. Now I realize Jesus inviting himself over to Zacchaeus' house may seem a little strange to us. Why would people do that to a supervillain? But it would have been absolutely wild in this culture 2,000 years ago. Zacchaeus was not a good dude, and everyone knew that. Jesus knew it too. But Jesus wasn't satisfied with only knowing about Zacchaeus. He wanted to take that step of going right to where he lived. He wanted to really get to know who Zacchaeus was. See, there's something about where we live that says a lot about who we are. Where we live is usually the place where we're most comfortable. It's a place where our guard comes down and we can be who we really are. Can you imagine Jesus coming over to Zacchaeus' house and Zacchaeus taking off his sandals, putting on his barbecue apron, and kicking back with Jesus and going, "What up, dude? Thanks for coming over." Now, I'm not sure that's exactly how it went down, but one thing is clear. Jesus wanted to make it personal. Sure, he already knew everything about Zacchaeus, but he still decided to take a step into his world to get to know his backstory. Jesus made it personal with Zacchaeus when he took a step to understand where Zacchaeus lived. Visiting Zacchaeus' house meant that Jesus would get to know him in a very personal way. Jesus would get a glimpse into an important part of Zacchaeus' backstory. Of course, Jesus already knew his backstory because he is Jesus. But that visit showed Zacchaeus that he was accepted, story and all. You see, where we live isn't just a physical address. It's a place that gives others a glimpse into our personal circumstances, our situations, and our day-to-day lives. Where we live is a part of our story, and it's the part most people don't typically get to see. And what's cool is that what Jesus did for Zacchaeus was an example of something that Jesus does for you and for me too. While he may have walked into just one man's house that day, it gives us a small glimpse into the way God stepped into all of our lives when he chose to send his son Jesus to earth. The God who created the universe stepped into our world to understand where we come from, to show us how much he cares, to understand our stories in a real and personal way. It's personal because Jesus understands our backstory. He knows all of our stories because he knows where we live, what it's like to walk in our shoes. He doesn't just see and understand a little bit about us. He knows us because he knows our whole story, and he loves us no matter what. It's personal because Jesus understands your story. If the way we treat other people is going to be personal, then we have to choose to understand their stories, just like Jesus does for us. So, where do we start? Well, before we get to know others, we might just need to become known ourselves. For some of us, our first step might be to acknowledge that Jesus wants to know you personally. In fact, he already knows you better than you know yourself, but you might need to invite him into your story. He wants to be a part of your life in a real personal way. You can talk with an adult you look up to or a friend you trust about what it means to follow Jesus and experience life the best way that he wants for you. Then, it might be time to let someone else into your story. Your step might be to share more of who you are to someone else. Not just some random person or a stranger, but someone who really cares about you. Someone you trust who is already a big part of your life. A great place to start is right here at Milestone. What if you started to share a little bit more about where you come from? What if you told someone at Milestone a little bit about what your life is really like? What if you opened up to share more of your backstory? It could be the step that helps them know and care about you personally in a way they couldn't before. Maybe you're in a place where you want to make it personal with others, the way Jesus did for you. You can do this by giving someone the gift of going second. In other words, you can be the first one to share. You can choose to share a little bit of your own backstory so that the other person can know it's safe to share some of theirs with you. When you share a little bit about what you're living with right now, it can give someone the courage to do the same. And when that other person does share their story with you, make sure you choose to listen and ask questions to learn about them. When you show someone you care by listening and wanting to know them more, you show them just how personal getting to know their story is for you. Just imagine if getting to know the stories of your classmates, your teammates, your neighbors was something you took personally, you'd start seeing people for who they really are instead of who you think they are. You'd become known as a person who really cares, a person they can trust, a person who wants to know people in a real and personal way. You actually have an opportunity to do just that with some of your peers at school or your family. So remember, it's personal because Jesus understands your story. And as I get ready to wrap up today, I want you to think about this question and discuss it with someone at your house. What's one thing most people don't really know about me? All right, ask that question in your home. It's great to be with you. Much love. I'll see you next time.